0.3 gave us what we asked for: more power, better crafting, faster progression. The patch felt great. But 3 months in, we need to talk about the problems that buffing numbers can't solve. Quick note, this is different from my usual build guides. This is a one-time analysis of 0.3's structural issues as we head into 0.4. These aren't complaints, just some observations about what might need addressing beyond number tweaks. I've played over 3,000 hours this past year, and I love this game. I say that up front because this comes from wanting PoE 2 to succeed, not from wanting to tear it down. The core tension has been here since day one. The game markets itself with action elements. These attract a broader audience expecting action gameplay to determine outcomes. But once you understand the formulas, PoE 2 is fundamentally a math game. Seasoned players can open a PoB and predict with 70 to 80% accuracy whether a build will work before logging in. The action layer often feels like window dressing on stat checks. This isn't inherently bad. We're here because we love optimizing numbers. The problem shows up when boss fights feel less like skill challenges and more like, do you have the stats to skip this mechanic? I'm not saying the game is too hard or too easy. I'm saying there's a disconnect between how the game presents challenges versus how players actually overcome it. You either skip right through mechanics with stats, or you don't. This identity question affects everything downstream, from how loot should work, to what content should exist, to how the economy functions. There's been persistent player feedback since 0.1, especially noticeable in this league, that drop rates feel inconsistent. Many report that when servers are crowded, individual drops feel turned down. I don't have GGG's server data. I can't prove a shared drop pool exists. But if it does work that way, where drops are distributed across active players, then it explains what people are experiencing. When more players are online, each person gets a smaller slice of that pool. And here's where multi-boxing becomes a serious problem. Certain players run automated 6-man parties, which means one person is essentially claiming 6 shares of that pool. They're stacking quantity multipliers far beyond what solo play can achieve, draining drops that would otherwise go to legitimate solo players. This creates 2 levels of damage. First, it directly reduces what solo players get from drops if the shared pool theory is true. Second, it floods the market with currency, making trade league prices inflate faster than solo players can keep pace with. I'm not accusing GGG of intentionally punishing solo players, but the perception exists, and perception drives player retention. GGG wants high engagement metrics and active players, but when some of that activity is automated or exploitative, it creates economic pressure on legitimate players. Balancing enforcement against healthy server populations is tough. Economic health determines how long leagues feel engaging. When the market feels skewed, even good drops feel unrewarding. To fix 0.2 complaints, GGG introduced powerful crafting currencies in 0.3. On paper, this was pretty much what players asked for. Initially, it felt great. Progression became faster and more deterministic. But there's a cost. Predictable crafting kills the treasure hunt. For many non-mirror grade gears, you don't need to get lucky anymore. You just follow a crafting recipe. The vast majority of rares and uniques you find in maps are worthless compared to what you can reliably craft. When good gear becomes accessible this quickly, the league feels shorter. Players hit their power ceiling faster, and suddenly there's less to chase. The dopamine hit of finding something valuable gets replaced with, just craft it. Deterministic versus RNG is one of the hardest problems in ARPG balancing. 0.3 might have swung a little bit too far toward predictability, given the lack of content diversity. Right now, the vast majority of endgame is mapping. When mapping is 80 to 90% of your playtime, one stat becomes disproportionately important: movement speed. This is why Rower Mount and Headhunter remain efficiency kings. This is why Deadeye dominates, not because it's broken, but because it's inherently optimal for the only content loop we have. Personally, I've once reached a point where I bulk craft 150% delirious abyssal maps. I know I'm losing currency doing that. It's not profitable, but I do it because I'm desperate for some challenges. The natural difficulty curve ends too early, and I'm burning currency just to feel engaged. The meta isn't broken because balance is bad. The meta feels narrow because content diversity is limited. When you only have one activity at scale, you only need one type of build. The Blood Mage being OP is another story. The issues arose when 0.3 introduced items like Atalui's Bloodletting and Undying Hate Jewel without sufficient testing of their interactions. When you combine these items with existing Blood Mage mechanics and Wrathpith, you break the math. You get builds that use life for casting, crit, and damage with decent sustain and very few downsides. This creates perfect builds that dominate the meta. This isn't an isolated incident. We see similar patterns with rushed item interactions and insufficient testing across multiple systems in this league. The Blood Mage situation is just the most visible example of broader issues. I'm critical because I care about where this game goes. Most of these problems trace back to two connected issues: limited production capacity and unclear vision. GGG is maintaining regular updates for two great games at the same time. That's incredibly difficult, and it shows. When PoE 2 was launched, the goal was to make something different from PoE 1. But too many things feel like they're different just for the sake of being different, without meaningful innovation. PoE 1's successful designs came from over a decade of player feedback and refinement. You can't force differentiation and expect it to work. And what we're seeing now proves that. Recent updates are making PoE 2 more and more like PoE 1. The zoom fast playstyle is starting to come back despite the initial vision to move away from it. They're contradicting their original direction, which shows they haven't settled on a clear direction for what PoE 2 should be. Here's where it gets complicated. Different players want completely different things. Some may want authentic action gameplay. Others might just want simple, efficient farming. GGG seems to want all of these playstyles at once, but they're stretched too thin to deliver on any of them properly. When you can't offer enough variety to truly satisfy everyone, you need to pick a direction and commit. Right now, PoE 2 feels stuck between multiple visions without committing to any. I don't expect 0.4 to fix everything. These aren't problems you solve by adding new things or tweaking numbers. They're structural questions about what this game wants to be, and those take time and resources to work through. I think they'll get there. Drop a comment and let me know your thoughts. If you found this insightful, please consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I will see you soon in the next one.